What we do here is go back.
Hello and welcome. I'm Cody. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'm going to be talking about the Insta360 One X and editing workflows in both Studio 2019 and Adobe Premiere. Thanks for joining me. Thanks to Insta360 for letting me host this, and Terry Martin, thanks for giving me a good shout out. Well, let's get started, and let's start with some files. So I'm going to pop over to my desktop here, into my footage, and the last video you saw right before you cut to me was of St. Joe, Christmas lights walking. I'm just going to start that. We're just going to start off right there. And let's start with the file name. I have a couple other JPEGs saved in this folder, but pause that. So I just want to start off. The file name gives you just a ton of metadata and information. The date, the time you shot it, the clip number, and which clip you're looking at. So let's break that down. You can see it starts with video. Images will start with IMG _2019 12/10, which was the date just about 4 days ago that I shot this. And then you have 18/18/51, which is 24-hour time, military time. So that's actually 6/18/51. You've then got 2 zeros, which will mark what lens you're using. So these two files need to stay together. So this is just saying lens 0, lens 1, and then clip number 310. I filmed a lot that day. It's great. So we have our Insta360 Studio. I double clicked on the clip image and it opened up Studio 2019 automatically. If you have a Studio 2019 open and you double click another image, it's going to open up a different instance of Studio. If you drag the clip in, then it's going to populate it right here. I'll pop over here, for example. I'm going to take this image, drag and drop it in. Boom, it shows up right there. If you double click it, it's going to open another Insta360 Studio altogether. Just in case you've run into that, it's happened a couple times for me, but it's all right. So take a look at the program itself. You've got your footage tab on the left, and your viewer in the middle, which has your free capture tab for edits, your application with a lot of your customization options here on the right, and your timeline here on the bottom. In free capture, in view mode, you're not really going to make any edits here. You're just going to be able to sort of play with the footage and play with your different view styles. And here, this is a good idea if you're looking around for stitch lines, if you're looking for anything like that. You can preview it in the view tab first and get a good idea. Tab, look around, skip around the clip a little bit, and that's great. Here you can mark in and out where you want to trim, how long you want your clip to be. This is just, walking around some beautiful Christmas lights here in St. Joe. And on this side, the lock direction, I've seen a bunch of people ask, can I only shoot with one lens? How do I just tell it to just be the one forward lens? This is the easiest way to accomplish that. There isn't a way to just say shoot one lens and just have it be that. You can live stream on just one side, but not capture. The lock direction, what it does is, if I leave it unchecked, I'm kind of walking in a straight line. So let's move to a part where, you know, I kind of move a little bit. Pretty much, if you're moving the camera a lot, if your camera ends up, you know, moving, say you have it mounted to a bike or something, flow state stabilization is going to keep it, lock direction is going to keep it focused straight where the camera is pointed front. That way you can just focus on the one lens and have it stationary in that at most times, which is great here. Now my lens is locked. I had moved the camera a little bit at this point, so you get to see that clear as day. If you're using a venture case or a dive case, the stitching, go to a spot where you can see this stitch. So I didn't use a venture or dive case on this, so a good example of what it's doing is it's essentially just trying to merge the image together, and it works pretty well. The true audio vocals, so I did a test here kind of at the end of the day yesterday. Yeah, we'll save those changes.
Here's a good audio test. Waves scratching next to me. I'm just going to continue to talk over the wave.
So the original audio,
Here's a good audio test. Waves.
it's taking every bit of sound it can and giving it to you. They've definitely improved this over a ton of updates, and it's gotten better. This True Audio update has definitely helped a lot as well. So the vocal enhancement is really taking the two loudest points and merging them together so your voice is more prominent. And the background noise, is kind of taking the loudest sounds and bringing them out rather than honing in on a sound and making it more prominent. Depending on the circumstance, depending on wind and other things like that, the vocal enhancement might help more, the background enhancement might help more. You're just going to have to kind of play with it on your own and see which one works best for you. You still have stitching calibration here. In this picture, I'm well far away from the camera, so there are no stitch lines. I've got a selfie stick right in there. It's invisible, so you can't see it. It's pretty awesome. Okay, and then the Nader logo. I still see some people on the community. If there's a dark spot at the bottom of the video as you're looking at it, select that, uncheck Use Nader logo, and it should go away. And also you could add in your own 500 by 500 image in PNG, so you could stick that there, which is cool. So let's just do a couple quick edits here. I'm going to set a keyframe. One of the biggest questions I think is how do you edit faster? Editing faster really, for me, involves learning the quick keys, having a good mind of when to use those quick keys, and just continually over and over using the program to edit and using those keys is the best advice I can give. So I'm going to set a tiny planet so we can see everything, kind of bring it in a little bit. And I'm going to click just down a little. We know I'm just sitting here talking. Camera stays still, so we can have a little fun here. we'll go little fish eye, weird eye. So if I've set my first keyframe not at the beginning of the video, what's going to happen is Insta360 software is going to take the first image it has, which typically is a fisheye at the front of the lens forward. It's going to take that and then move to the first keyframe you've set. If you want to eliminate that, if you don't want this at the front, sometimes, you know, it's really cool. Really easy to fix. You can take this keyframe or set a new keyframe, put it right at the top. Now the top of the video is going to start. Boom. And say, let's do another natural view and look just right down at the waves. And let's say, little stitch right there, gone. Stitching calibration. And so, we've got a few edits here. One thing I can suggest is I see a ton of people out there making, you know, everyone's making really cool edits, whether it's, you know, on vacation, around town, in the store, whatever it is. I suggest when you set a keyframe, hold it there for a second. Maybe you want to grab attention one direction, but sometimes I don't get to even see what you want me to see because the keyframe moves so fast. And I've been accused of this as well, and so I've had to kind of pull back some of my cool creative stuff and make it a little more simple. So what I would say to that, maybe instead of popping out right from the beginning, let's hold the shot at the top. I'm going to take the first keyframe, copy it, paste it, and now it's going to hold at the beginning, move in, move to my next, and stay there. So that's a little more bearable, we'll say, than, you know, just always a constant movement. Kind of gives, with all the options in the world, it's kind of hard to pull back sometimes and just say, no, you know, that may not be okay for, you know, everyone to watch, but you know, you live and learn, and what I could say is just keep editing and keep putting stuff out there and listen to what people got to say. All right, let's just go full out, put the sunset in the middle there, and I'm gonna, you can see if you haven't really used this program on desktop a lot, you can see how quick and easy it is to kind of just set a shot, keep it there, and boom. And I'm going to keep it there like that. So clicking through the edit just real quick. Boom. And maybe we'll just have a little reverse periscope mode happen at the end. Yep. Stay there. Keep that at the end. Okay, so we've got an edit. You're happy with it. You've made your keyframes. Everything feels real cool. Let's get it out of Studio and into Premiere. So exporting is, before exporting, always be sure to save your changes. So before exporting, in this demonstration, I'm going to try to keep everything at the highest resolution possible. Not everyone's computer is going to be able to handle it. I'm going to give some examples of proxy workflows and some other kind of workarounds you can do if you're running, say, on a laptop and stuff like that. So I've set my resolution to 0. So this comes set at 1920 by 1080. Your bitrate is set at 18 off the top, H.264, and you have the color plus and remove grain options in there as well, file name and that. A good hack, and I don't know if many people are actually doing this, you can export at 4K. If you just pop in 3840 by 2160, it's going to export it at 4K. So I think even if you're doing your final edit at 1920 by 1080, I think that the 4K has just a ton of different options as far as when it comes to coloring and stuff like that. It's giving you more information to work with, and that's really cool. So I'm gonna, like I say, I'm gonna crank this thing up all the way to 200. Actually, I'm gonna go H.265 200, and actually I'll cancel that. Let's go over that right here. So H.265 in code format only takes 2/3 of the bit rate as H.264. H.265 is a new codec that's slowly rolling out, everyone's using. It creates the same video as a H.264. It's just smaller, which allows it to be a little more flexible and able to be used in different scenarios and things like that. I've been using it more recently. Not everyone's computer has the H.265 codecs or HEVC, but if you're editing a ton of stuff, putting it at H.265 is definitely going to give you, it's going to save you space but maintain the quality, which is awesome in every case possible. So let's just do, I'm going to do a quick test, and let's see, we're going to go SJ stream test 1. And you see, I leave the final _-207. In case you get into Premiere and you find that the edit you did on the clip, maybe some part of it isn't right, or you're just not happy with it, I keep that file name, the clip number at the end, so I can go back to the clip and make any edits here in Studio that I need before spitting it over to Premiere, or even in that case replacing the file in Premiere if it's the exact same length. I'm going to just create a new folder called exports for us here. And at this point, I'm just going to leave it original. I'm not going to select any of the color plus or remove grain features. I'm going to do a little test with that, actually. So you see, this is a short video, 22 seconds-ish, 21 seconds. It's spitting it out 4K, and boom, that took, you know, less than or about the same time as.
So here's a good audio test with waves crashing next to me. Just going to continue to talk over the waves so you can hear my voice. And
so, boom, the file's there. Now, if we do the same thing, I'm taking the exact same edit. I'm going to keep it 4K, H.265, all the way out, and let's hit color plus. Now, the last test, yep. SJ stream test 02. So if you're thinking about organizing or wondering about how to organize clips best, one of the better ways to do it is just plain labeling. I labeled this one number 2, color plus, giving me more information. I know this is the second file, the second export, and it's gonna go. So you could see already that the color plus is taking a considerable more amount of time. What it's doing is you're applying a LUT directly over the video itself. So you adding color on top of video, whether it's in Premiere, whether it's in Final Cut, no matter what program you're in, it's going to take more time to render. It's going to take more time to export, and that makes no difference on whether you have a fast system or a slow system. It's injecting information into the image, and so there's going to be some drawbacks. It's not really a drawback. You just have to know that this export is going to take you more time if you're in a quick turnaround environment. So while this is kind of processing here, I'm running my system. I've got a i7 6800K CPU, 32 gig of RAM. I have NVIDIA 2080 hybrid video card, and Samsung solid state drives. And I think that solid state drives are huge because they are considerably faster than a spindle drive, a 5400 RPM or a 7200 RPM drive. The solid state, I mean, you're 3 or 4 or 5 times faster. And what that does is it lets the entire operating system run smoothly. All your information is being accessed and moved around on one space. The spindle drives, as they're spindles that spin, take a little more time. They're a little more slow. If you have footage on there and you're editing from it, you might run into some issues, just simply because there's the hard drive can't move fast enough, so it might cause issues with playback. It could be issues with stuttering footage, a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, this 20-second clip, I'm gonna say, take probably like 10 times longer. And again, this is not a knock on using this mode. This is just knowing information, knowing it's going to take you longer, knowing that it's injecting their color plus LUT onto it on your export. So it's a really cool addition they've just rolled out and made, and I'm sure that it's going to have a ton of enhancements to it as the updates continue to come on. It's great to get updates. So I'm going to let this thing just finish out, but I am going to pop over to Premiere into this project that I've created just for us today. Also, if you're wondering what your computer's doing during exporting, during anything, you can open up Windows or Mac. You can open up the activity monitor, and I've got this. It's Windows has now integrated it into Task Manager. So if you have your Task Manager here, you can see everything I got going on. Insta360 Studios, Premiere, Chrome, OBS Studio. Click the Performance tab, and it gives you just this beautiful amount of information. And you can also open a resource monitor to kind of get a little deeper in information if you want. But honestly, it sounds crazy. I keep this up almost 100% of the time while I'm editing, just so I know if your memory starts to get high and you're about to export, it's probably a smart idea to restart your computer clear your memory, close all your programs, and then start your export. It's a lot. Your computer's going to react a lot better if it doesn't have a lot of CPU load already running and memory already taken up by other programs. And each one of the components, I think, if it's more powerful, it's going to be faster. But whatever your slowest component is that's as fast as things will get. So if you have a USB 2.0 cable plugged into a solid state drive, it's going to be slow because the cable can't handle it. So get a USB-C cable and boom, you're going to be great. So the export's finished. We're back here. You can see CPU. This is about normal with Studio Premiere running. And I'm just going to minimize that by double clicking on it and kind of keep it over here in the corner. Our export did finish of Christmas lights. No, of the stream test.
So here's a good audio test. Waves crashing next to me. Just going to continue to talk over the waves so you can hear my voice.
Move that away for a second.
Waves crashing close. I'm here. Waves crashing far.
So that's Color Plus, and that's the original. So you can see the Color Plus is actually bringing out the colors in the dark really well. In some cases it might work great. I've seen it make a difference in just about everything I've been editing on. And it's cool. Like I said, they're going to continue to roll out updates for that as well. And since I've got this thing queued up and ready to go, why not do the third test, remove grain. I'm going to keep it at H.265 all the way up. And instead of Color Plus, I'm going to put remove grain. So we'll say the Color Plus export was probably 10-15 minutes. The remove grain is a little bit faster, and it's gonna kick along here. While we're doing that, let's test some 360 footage using the Adobe PR plugin from Insta360, which, if you installed Studio, there was a little checkbox that by default is there. And you check that box, and it also installs not only the Adobe PR plugin, but the thumbnail plugin. So if you have INSP files or the .insv files with the thumbnail plugin installed into Windows, you at least are able to now get a peek at each one of your files. You're not just stuck to the Insta360 logo there. And that's kind of a huge help. I took most of this footage, in the same place, so I pretty much know what I got. So with that plugin installed, I'm just going to simply drag and drop my two clips into Premiere and let them import. And it's going to sit here and say, wait, what are you doing? Give Premiere a second sometimes. I've got some exports going in the background. So, boom, just like that. So you've got each lens, each of the two files now in Premiere. And if you've brought both of these in before, you're going to notice they're kind of the same thing. If you put the audio files next to each other, they're just about the same. You're looking at pretty much a replica. I do believe there's 4 mics. The 2 mics are in this file and the 2 mics are in this file. We're not going to get specific on audio here, but you notice that each one of these files is the same as you drag them both. So what I've done is just taken the main file here. That's the one I'm going to keep. I'm going to get rid of this guy because it's kind of a duplicate, and I just want to work with this one 360 clip. Couple things. I'll start kind of down here in the toolbar. I've got my toggle proxies button, and another very helpful, useful button is the VR button. So this is kind of the view you're going to get if you're looking at this in the VR headset, whether it be the Oculus, the HTC, Valve Index, any third-party VR system is going to be pretty compatible with this. So we've got our whole 360 clip, and we're able to scroll through, you know, relatively fast. If you zoom in on the timeline more and you get kind of down to a single frame, you can kind of move it a little more without rendering, which is great, which is awesome. If you do want to create a proxy file, you can do it through Premiere, and you can also do it through Insta360 Studio. Kind of in a Premiere, I've noticed, takes a little more time to process the file when you send it to proxy. It's converting it from .insv to H.264 or whatever your proxy file is. And that, you know, for longer clips, I found the process just takes a ton of time. So let's kind of look at a way we can use Insta360 Studio to help with that. Let's pop back in. I'm going to still have this clip loaded in this project. So I want to make sure the entire clip is selected. I want to uncheck lock direction. These are the settings I found that match the original clip through Insta360 Studio. And what I'm going to do is save that. Resolution 5760, 2880, that is 5.7K that I recorded at. I'm going to push this to a H.265 for quality. And proxy file, a relatively small but still quality. H.265, you could probably get away with 10. I'm going to, yeah, let's go 10. H.264, you can go a little more, 12, 15, 20, but you want the file to be small enough that when you're in Premiere and it's accessing the file, it's not causing a ton of extra load. This is to help your edit process and speed. So I'm going to send it to that same folder I've been exporting the majority of this stuff to. And this is going to take quite a while. Full 360, 10-minute video. That's going to chug along here, huh? So again, I'm using the mid-range computer. I got 32 gigs of RAM, and I'm going to pull this back up so you can see. You can see my memory's starting to chalk up a little bit because I'm starting to do a lot. But you can take this file and attach it in here in Premiere through proxies, attach proxies. If you do want to create a proxy file, you can do it through here, right click on the file, create proxies. And you can set, this is Adobe's basic ingest settings. presets already set by Adobe within the program. I have ingest presets I use, but I want to keep this for pretty basic for most people. If you use one of those presets within Premiere, what you're going to find is that when you select it, it's going to kind of shrink in the sides a little bit. So if you're worried about text placement or things like that, you want a proxy to be the exact same resolution as the file that you're editing with. So that way you don't have any issues as far as things getting wider or smaller. If you're just editing video, you're not concerned about motion tracking, things like that, you could spit it out right at this exact same 1536 by 790 and go, and I'm just gonna stop this guy. I'll let him go. And it's gonna pop open Media Encoder. And start the task, and I'm just going to immediately stop it. And it'll take a second to get from Premiere over to Media Encoder, depending on how large your file size is. And I'm just going to pause it. That way I don't crash my computer and the stream at the same time. That'd be quite unfortunate. So you can see computer struggling a little bit. That's just to say that you know, this footage is massive. It's 5.7K, 6K UHD. It's huge. It gives you the ability to capture everything and do the VR stuff, and then utilize just shots of it for whatever. You didn't even know you captured stuff at some points. And that's really great, but do keep in mind, you know, with large resolutions come lots of storage space. And if you're using, you know, as I mentioned, if you're using a spindle external drive, something other than SSD, it's going to work. I keep footage on backup spindle drives, and I've pulled it, I've exported it. But if you do run into problems, try to get the files over to your SSD if you have one, your main local drive. Do all your editing on your local drive, and then you can, you know, back up the files to an older spindle drive, and everything will be okay. So we'll close you. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and stop this just so I can move on. So just real quick, I know I got everything started before I started walking. So let's say I'm going to take out the first 5 seconds or so. Say maybe add a transition, fade up the sound. And I know at the end here, I held still for a couple seconds after I walked through the arch. And I'm going to give just a little bit extra on the end here, just in case. Now, just food for thought. If you shift click, or if you're using snap in the timeline and you click all the way to the end, it's going to give you a black viewer. That's because it's actually selecting this frame here. So when you do an export, make sure that the playhead is not there. Make sure the playhead is actually, it looks like it's one frame back, but you're saying take this last frame and make it the last. That way, at the end of your edit, you've got this nice, great long edit, and then you have one clip of black. If you're doing a loop or something cool, you want to make sure that end to end, your export is exactly what you want it. You definitely don't want any variables or, you know, holes of black in there. So we've got, I know this is the clip I want, and real quick, because it's just simply one clip, it's actually pretty easy to color. If you're not much of a colorist or you don't use this very often, welcome to Color Scope. What you're seeing here is a representation of what you're seeing on the screen. It is color waves, similar to if you see sound, you know, sound waves, it's kind of the same thing, except you're seeing the representation of color right there. I mean, right in front of you. And so with basic corrections, color correction is a very interesting thing, but really ultimately what we want to do is bring out the colors. We want the colors to be great and vibrant, and you don't want a lot of pixelation. So I try to keep my color range in between, we'll say 5 and 95 here, or, you know, even we'll say in this case 230 and 26. That's a good range. What you'll see, we'll say, we'll take the blacks here and we'll just make it all black. This looks really cool, but what you're gonna see once you export it is just kind of this digital grainy mess. So keeping an eye on what these things are doing here actually helps you achieve a good quality color. And there's basic here. I'm a huge curves guy. You find out as you start editing kind of what features and tools you'll use to do what with. The One X footage is great. You definitely have to be careful in low light. You know, the Color Plus does help a bit, but like any camera, you need a lot of light to shoot at night. And if you don't have that light, sometimes you're just gonna have to, you know, kind of see some grain, which none of us like seeing grain, but that's where we're at. If you do, I've been able to take fantastic night photos using this as well. Okay, so we've added a bit of curve and color. Why not give it a little bit of saturation? Okay. Boom. So we've got our 360 video. I added some transitions at the front and back. Nope. Now I added transitions at the back. I'm going to say I want to spit this clip up to YouTube. And so YouTube is going to accept the 5.7K file without too much of a problem. But let's get it there first. So you can hit File, Export. Again, I'm a huge Quick Keys fan. So wherever you can, Quick Keys will help you in life. So, all right, let me make this a little bit bigger. So we've got the basic file settings. I'm going to export in H.264 because at the bottom here you'll see Premiere will write the video as VR data right out of Premiere or Media Encoder, whichever you select, which saves you from having to inject it later with Spiral metadata injector. or something like that. I'm going to choose render at maximum depth. I'm going to select the color profile to high from main. This is just a different color profile. A profile allows just more colors, different dynamic, more information, things like that. And our bit rate. So if we go back and look, the original file bit rate, Control I, is about 100 megabits per second. And resolution 2997, 5760, 2880. And so our timeline is that here in Premiere. So we've matched. I'm going to do a variable bit rate 2-pass. 2-pass, if you're exporting a file and you want it to look super clean, or we'll say if you've exported a file and you notice that it just does not look anywhere near as good, exported as when you were editing it, the bit rate is really probably where the issue is. The higher the bit rate, the bigger the file, the more information. Lower the bit rate, the smaller all that. So you want to find a good in between, because there is a point where too much is just you're creating information that isn't necessarily even going to be used appropriately. So you want to create a file, and we want to stay relatively similar to what we shot at. Maybe give it a little more a little more of a bit rate, so we can see a little more detail, clean up anything that's unclear. So again, you can export at 100, you can export at 200, you can export it through, I mean, you can export it all the way up to 2000 if you'd like. It's going to create a 152 gig file, which is going to be just about as high quality as H.264 can get, though it's not going to make your footage better. It's going to take that footage and sort of reinforce its place. If there's graininess in your video, if there's graininess in your video when you started editing, there's probably going to be graininess in your video on your export. So the more that you're aware of that, the cleaner your export will look. Okay, I typically, call me crazy, I've found that H.264 VBR 2-pass with 300 megabit a second is a good looking quality file, and you can get a good idea. Now, yeah, it's a little overkill. I'm doing 3 times more bit rate than the original file was recorded, but once you view it once you view it on YouTube and stuff, you could really see a difference. Once it goes through YouTube's compressions, because you have to remember, once you have a file, your H.264, H.265, ProRes, DNX HD, whatever it is, the platform you're uploading it to, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, they're taking it and they're compressing it again to then put it on your stream and on the feed and stuff. So at this point, I'm trying to maintain the highest quality possible. This file is going to go directly to YouTube, so I can push the limit a little more. YouTube allows for way more file codecs, file types, up to 125 gig file, and I mean, I've seen 24-hour videos that you can make a length of video just pretty much what you want nowadays. The other thing I will say, 2997. It plays really, really well with 5994 frames per second as well. So if you have a video that has a lot of movement, maybe you want it just a little more fluid and smooth and you know, put more frames in there. Doubling 2997 to 5994 is a relatively clean frame rate difference, you can give it a try. I've edited some videos, exported on 5994. They look cool. Some are just, they have this weird, I don't know, fluidness about them. It's kind of just how you really want your export to look. So this file you could check out on my YouTube page, Krieg Media. I just recently uploaded this this Christmas walk, and I'll throw that in the comments here in a bit. So let's see. We've got 360 footage. Let's go. I'm going to put this in a bin, 360. Let's go grab those two clips that we were working on earlier. Desktop. Exports. There's part of that proxy file. So let's create a new timeline. So we've got our different looks here. So let's okay, so it's a 4K sequence with 4K files. Again, you can export 1080p, 1920 by 1080 from there. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. And again, here you can see that even though I've got a pretty decent computer, that it's still, my memory's starting to kick up there. My CPU is running. So you have to really keep in mind, I mean, I'm ultra keeping in mind because I'm holding the stream, but watch that, because as that number starts to go up, your computer's going to run a little more sluggish and a little more slow. And when it comes to editing, the most frustrating thing I could find is when your computer all of a sudden is just like, oh, dude, save everything, close everything, restart your computer, Windows or Mac, it doesn't matter. There's times when you just need to reset the memory altogether, and honestly, like, take a quick 5-minute walk outside and you're going to be great. So I've got these files. Let's just do, you know, like a quick, cool comparison. So what I'm going to do is set these up in a real simple order. And we'll say, sure, 6 seconds. 6 seconds on each, great. We'll do 12 seconds. And at 18, we'll just leave one. Okay, so I've got my original clip here. I got my color plus clip here. And I've got my remove grain clip here. Okay, so definitely we're going to start with the color. Sorry, we're going to start with the original, move to color plus, and then remove grain. So I'm going to remove that there. So now we go from there to there. And I'm going to remove these two here. So it goes there to there. Now, because these are under this edit, I'm just going to remove them now that I've timed everything out. And boom, this whole thing should be in an order. Now I'm going to close out of these guys real quick. So, all right. Give this guy a quick render. Speaking of rendering, I would say also, if you're exporting and you've done everything, It helps to render your entire sequence before editing, before exporting. What you're doing is just figuring out all the ones and zeros before you go into that export process. The less things you have to do at export, the better. Typically, I'll take my edit from Premiere, render the whole sequence out once it's done, and I'll send it over to Media Encoder and let Media Encoder handle the final output. And I'll save my project and close it. Probably typically restart my computer too, because as you can see from here, I think the last time you saw my memory, it was at 16. Now we're at 17. Still cranking along, no worries. That was extremely loud, and I apologize. So I'm gonna, because it's loud, let's just real quick, you can take this guy down, we'll say 8. Actually, let's go 10-ish. Bam, 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 bam.
So here's a good audio test. Wade's scratching next to me. Just going to continue to...
So we've got all our clips. Test 1, 2, and remove grain. Let's render that last clip out, huh?
So here's a good audio test. Wade's scratching next to me. Just going to continue to talk over the waves so you can hear my voice. And Wade's scratching close. I'm here. Wade's scratching far. On the lake. And the sunset peak. Yep.
Okay, so you see the difference between original, color plus, and remove grain. That's going to be, you know, a little edit we'll do. Okay, so let's export this 4K sequence. Depending on where you're going with this export, H.264, ProRes, DNX HD, this is kind of the interesting part. Okay, so if you're going to social media, each platform sort of has different specifications. Instagram is going to have, you've got your stories, which are vertical, and then you've got your typical square, which is 1080 by 1080. You've got landscape, portrait. There's a lot of different modes. So once you have your edit done, we'll say, okay, I am editing for YouTube. This main edit is going to go to YouTube, but I also want it on those other platforms. The best thing to do once you have that edit, create a new sequence and say, okay, this is going to be my YouTube. So we'll say stream test, color plus, YouTube. And just to make some things easier, boom. So cool, we have our 4K sequence here. I'm going to duplicate it, and we're going to say this is going to go to Instagram. And I'm going to do this for my main Instagram, which is 1080 by 1080. So let's create a 1080 by 1080 sequence. Nice little square. Everything has changed, of course. So what you can do, now that we've changed the frame rate, changed the resolution, take your original YouTube, drag it in there, tell them to keep the existing settings because we set it for Instagram. Okay, now once you have your previous YouTube sequence in there, what you can do is easily go into your effect controls and scale it down to whatever you'd like. And you notice this is kind of the same thing that Instagram is doing in its prompt to upload. You have that little button that'll make it bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. It's stretching it either to say make it the full frame 1x1, or keep this 16 by 9 in here and remove the 1x1. You can do that yourself. That way, Instagram isn't handling that for you. And we're gonna say here it's about what, 50? 50? Yeah. Boom. And now our whole edit, as it gets in here slowly, whole edit needs to be rendered. So render it will.
Here's a good audio test. Waves crashing next to me. Just going to continue to talk over the waves so you can hear my voice. And waves crashing close. I'm here. Waves crashing far. On the lake. And the sunset deep. Yep.
Voila. We got a version for Instagram. So go to our export settings. We see 1080 by 1080. We're going to render a maximum depth here. And again, I'm going to change the profile to high so it's a little more colorful. VBR2 pass, and I typically, Instagram settings, I think say somewhere between 12 and 18 MBS for your export. I have put higher quality things on Instagram, and it just seems that they get scrunched back down because, again, Instagram is taking your file and compressing it so it'll go onto their timeline. So the closer you can get it to what they want is actually the best way to achieve a high quality looking picture. So we're taking this, this video is not VR. It's gonna go to Instagram. Yep, all looks good. Because this is going to be relatively short and quick export, let's see. Yeah, so it's not kick small 1080 by 1080 crop. Doesn't take too long. All right, and as this thing is finishing up, I'll show you some preferences here. I've had to pull back a little bit, but if you go to these settings, actually, these are kind of the same settings in Premiere. If you have a pretty beast of a computer, and you feel like you're not getting enough power out of it, there's a couple things you can do, at least within the Adobe framework, to kind of help Adobe, I mean, really just utilize your system to the max. I've switched this for the stream only. Typically, I have it on performance, and I only have 4 gigs selected here. And I can tell you that when I export, my CPU is at 100% and my memory is at about 80-75%, and it just flies once it starts encoding that stuff. So take a look in some of these other settings as well. You may find some things that'll help you with your editing process. Settings are, for me, I'm like sort of an ultra nerd, so I spend most of my times when I get to know a program in settings, checking, unchecking, clicking, what does it do, how does this look, export it this way, export it that way. A lot of my knowledge has been trial and error with me and a few other coworkers in a room trying to figure out a problem. That's really the best way to solve a lot of your issues. Luckily, like we've got a ton of forums, the Facebook communities here. You can pretty much reach out and get a question answered or anything from there. So we've got our file. Nice square. And that's how you make a crop. Premiere has recently released a tool that allows you to, where Premiere will sort of auto crop things. I haven't used it a ton yet, so I can't suggest it, but it is cool to see that there are options sort of rolling out to make that post process, a little bit easier. Okay. So we've exported that. Gone over some Premiere stuff. We've gone over some Adobe Media Encoder stuff. We've spent time with the One X, with the Studio, Insta360 Studio. If you have any other questions, feel free to comment at the bottom. Send me a message personally. I'm just a huge nerd. I love figuring out problems, especially when it comes to editing, post, 360 footage. Stuff it's interesting, and there are a lot of variables, whether it be software, hardware, things like that. But the fact that you could take a camera this size out and do basically, capture the entire world with just this handheld thing and create like just pretty stunning footage is awesome. So thank you today for joining me on this live stream. Thank you Insta360 again for letting me host this. Terry Martin, much love, man. Thanks for thanks for everything. I hope you enjoyed the stream today. And again, if you have any questions, send me a message on Facebook. You can follow me, Krieg360, Kreeg360 on Instagram, Krieg Media on YouTube. And thanks for watching. Have a good day.